Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Over Matter podcast. I'm your host, Laura Dockrell, and I'm so excited for today's guest. He is a financial broker with over 19 years of industry experience, helping individuals change the way they look at money. Please welcome Mario.
Thank
Hey, Mario.
you. Very glad to be here.
How's it going?
Amazing. Yeah, very excited for this.
I'm so excited for this. I said from day one of having this podcast that I really wanted to have someone who is into the financial world to teach us about tips and tricks, because I feel like the topic of finance is so nuanced and everyone has like their own takes on it. But I feel like just having a candid conversation about this topic is important and something that often gets neglected. So yeah, it's going to be great.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. Okay, so I'm going to just get right into it. So you've been in this industry a long time, over 19 years and counting. What exactly made you want to get into this line of work?
So it was not something that I planned. I was not really good at school. Math wasn't really my thing. So finances wasn't part of my future. I'm actually a certified chef. That's actually my background.
Okay.
So I got in the restaurant industry and I thought, this is it. This is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. You know, I fell in love with it. At 19, I started my own catering company. And I always had this entrepreneur side of me, and I wanted to just take it to such high heights. And I have to admit, I did well. But I only knew how to cook. I knew nothing about money. I knew nothing about business. And I found myself in massive debt. CRA became my business partner really quick because I didn't pay any taxes. It's not a good move. And at 21, I found myself going bankrupt. And so I had two options. Do I go back to the restaurant world and work those 100 hours a week, or do I look for something else? And a friend of mine who was doing well for themselves was actually in the finance industry. And he said, why don't you come work with me for a summer, learn a little bit about money so you're not so ignorant on the topic. And then when you do start your business again, you can go into it with more confidence. And that summer turned into 19 years.
Wow.
I fell in love with the culture, the atmosphere, the people, the challenge every day. And it's built me a wonderful life. And I've helped so many people along the way. So that's kind of how I fell into it.
That's awesome. I think that is such a great way to show that what your initial path might look like can always pivot, and it's always for the better.
Yeah.
Like the fact that you started out in the restaurant industry and then kind of shifted towards this path, like facing a challenge yourself, is so interesting to me. What was one of the first things you were taught about money once you shifted into this space?
Yeah, this was a challenge for me because growing up, money was not something we talked about in our home. It was very taboo. It was very hush hush. We didn't talk about debt. So when I started to realize that money is power, money can empower you, money is a tool, it really shifted my thinking. I looked at money like such a finite object. Money coming in, money going out,
Right.
just an ends to, paying my bills, instant gratification. And when I was taught that money can be a tool to build wealth, open doors for opportunity, growth, everything changed for me. That was an absolute eye-opener. It changed my whole perspective of money from that point on and the way I feel about money.
Yeah. What do you think is the most common way that people look at money? I saw on your website, you have the title, Change the Way You Look at Money, and this is something that you really have stuck with. I'd love to hear what that common perspective is that you've seen across the board.
Yeah, money to most people is like this elusive object. It's always just inches away from us. We never grasp it. And I think for a lot of people, it's just exactly how I mentioned how I first thought about money. I think most people do.
Yeah.
Where it's just, something that I need. I need to have it. And when you start changing and shifting your mindset to understanding what money can do for you, when you have empowerment when it comes to money, it's no longer something that's, we're a slave to anymore. If all we do is work for money, it's always going to outrun us. It's always going to be, a one step ahead. But when we learn to attract money, when we learn to make money a tool for our power, you watch how your emotions change towards it.
Yeah.
It's very, very, very powerful.
I love hearing that. I feel like that gives me goosebumps a little bit, because I agree the topic of money being taboo is so frequent, and you hear a lot of people say that. I'm someone who has always been kind of financially transparent. I just don't see the big deal, honestly.
Sure.
I think just like a lot of topics in life, like sex or money or things that people would see as like kind of unorthodox, I'm like, it's just a normal everyday thing that we all have to face. Why not be open about it and talk about it? But what do you think is the biggest piece of resistance that individuals have when it comes to being transparent about finances?
I think they look at a lack of money or a comparison to how other people, their perception of what other people have,
Right.
as an insecurity.
Yeah.
I think social media has forced us to speed up so much that we never think we're doing as well as other people. And I think that is the number one reason people have that resistance. You know, if anyone has a little bit of debt, it's like, oh my God, I'm a failure. There's something wrong with me. Everyone else I see is happy and going on trips and doing all this. They're still they're in debt too. I promise you, we're all struggling at a different level. And when you block out the noise and you stop worrying about what people think, you open the door to support and help and, you know, changing your way of thinking. A lot of what we have is caught. It's not taught.
Right.
We see our parents, you know, argue about money or struggle about money, and that changes our perceptions. And so we think we have to be better. And then, you know, we're kind of the blind leading the blind. Nobody's getting advice and support, or people are getting too much advice and support from online. And it's a mess. So people just tend to just avoid it and hope it goes away.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
It's kind of like out of sight, out of mind.
Yep.
I heard Ramit. Are you familiar with him?
Yeah.
He has that documentary on Netflix, How to Live Your Rich Life, and I love his philosophy of spending, you know, mercifully on or I might be butchering this quote, but spending what you want on the things that make you happiest in life, and then spending very little on the things that don't matter much to you. I think that's like a really good perspective to have. How much do you think our parents' perception of money and what they have taught us has influenced the way that we handle our finances as an adult?
I think it influences our everyday actions. I think so many of us grow up saying, I'm never going to be like my parents, only to end up exactly like our parents.
Classic.
Yeah, it's just, you know, I found myself the other day saying something that I swore I hated as a child.
Yeah.
And I stopped and I had to sit down. I'm like, please don't be like my dad. Even though my dad was a wonderful, amazing man. It's just, you kind of always want to be your own individual, but people don't realize how much what we see growing up influences our behavior.
Right.
Because none of us know what we're doing. You know, we're trying to navigate life. And so whenever we get lost or confused, we kind of go back to what's familiar.
Right.
You know, that kind of helps us push forward. And I think most of us, we just look back at our childhood. Oh, this is how my parents handled that. Or this is how, you know, they talked about money. The amount of people that I know that I talk to that are struggling right now, whose parents told them, you know, get a good job, get a pension, retire comfortably, are so lost and scared because that advice does not work anymore.
Right.
Go buy a house and, you know, build a property. It doesn't work like it used to work anymore. And I think that for most people, they have to start over. They have to take control of their lives and realize, you know, what our parents had is not what we have.
Yeah.
My dad's first house cost $12,000. Okay, I think I spent that on gas on the way here, and I have an electric car. So what does that tell you? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's
100%.
not, the price is not the same anymore.
Yeah.
It's not a different world. You have to adopt today's ideologies to be able to survive and navigate today. You can't use old ways of thinking.
I love that. And what do you think are some of the key drivers of today's ideologies with money?
I think it's negative. I don't think it's as positive as it used to be because now it's so easy to make money. It's the easiest time ever to make money. If you have a camera, you can put yourself on a stream and play video games for 12 hours a day and make hundreds of thousands of dollars. You know, so I think the perception of money right now is it's a scary time because for a lot of people, we're trying to compete with something that is out of our realm. You know, what people are doing to earn money right now it's impressive. It's amazing to see. It's so easy to make money.
Yeah.
But for so many of us, it's like we're in this constant world of trying to keep up.
Yeah.
And once you get into that world of keeping up versus just being grateful and having gratitude for what you do have and feeling appreciative and being mindful and self-aware, we're always insecure. We're always unhappy. We're always chasing the next thing. And I think that if people slow down a little bit in a world that's begging you to speed up, I think that right there is the healthiest thing you can do when it comes to understanding money nowadays.
I love that. And I would love to hear your perspective because you're obviously working with many individuals day to day about how to better manage money and teaching them tips and tricks of how to steer towards this. How many people do you see on the back end of things just being in completely shambled with what's going on money-wise, but on the outside looking in, you would think everything's okay and that there's nothing to really worry about there?
We, like with our clients, the people that most people look up to are the ones that are struggling a lot.
Oh my God, please talk about
this.
Yeah,
So I'm not going to, clients, I love you. I'm not going to mention any names. I understand the confidentiality, but a lot of times, because people have this persona that they have to live up to, they don't realize that there's a cost to living up to that persona. And for so many of them, they're not happy. You know, they're just surviving like we are, but in a different way.
Right.
And what I notice with a lot of people when it comes to, especially nowadays with the shambles that they're in, people aren't getting destroyed financially because of the big purchases. It's these $20 subscription to death. It's these, not managing our money. You said it earlier, out of sight, out of mind.
Mm-hmm.
People always think more money is going to come in, so they don't care how much money goes out.
Yeah.
They're always assuming it's always going to be there. And I have clients that are streamers and make hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And what they don't realize is nobody wants to watch somebody who's 40 years old play video games. And that their fan base is going to eventually grow up. And if they don't know how to invest their money correctly, if they don't know how to manage their money correctly, if they're not in control of it now, they're going to have so little of it later. The amount of athletes that are bankrupt after making millions and millions of dollars just a couple years after retirement is because you get accustomed to this lifestyle that you've created, this persona, this mask. And our finances can't keep up with that forever.
Right.
If your money's not working as hard as you are, eventually it's going to run out. And now you have to still maintain this lifestyle, and that's where things get ugly. So that's what we see a lot.
So what do you think are like some small tangible tips that we can do to start managing our money in a healthier way and having a healthier relationship with the way we look at it? Because I think that's the thing, right? I think if you're given a large amount of anything, whether it's wealth, whether it's, fame or fortune or whatever the case is, and you don't know how to manage. I've heard this quote, and it was actually in that book, The Psychology of Money, saying that if you don't know how to manage even 20 grand, how are you going to expect to know how to manage 100 if it were to eventually come in? And I just love to hear your perspective on that. Is there anything that you notice that we can change the way we look at it to make it seem more manageable and allow us to kind of build that wealth even further? Yeah.
So most people are really overwhelmed when it comes to finances. It's like this huge mountain that they have to climb. And what they have to understand when it comes to finances, it's more like small little hills. Just tackling one thing at a time is going to make it a lot more digestible.
Right.
We get into, that moment, it's like 12 o'clock at night and you're like, I need to change my entire life in this exact moment.
Yes.
And so you just I'm going to start doing this. I'm going to start budgeting. I'm going to get this and I'm going to invest for this. And then the morning you wake up and you're like, what was I thinking? I'm so overwhelmed. Where do I start?
I've been there.
I do that every single night for something. So I really recommend people just start small. I think something as powerful as just doing a budget can really, really make a difference for people because most people have no idea where their money's going.
Right. And
I heard a great quote once that it says, if you're not managing or investing your money, it's the difference between waking up and saying, this is where I want my money to go versus where did my money go?
Right.
And I think that if you just start with that, you're going to start realizing that you're going to appreciate money more when you realize how much you're spending and what you're spending it on.
Right.
A lot of times money's leaving and we don't recognize it. People are $800, $900 on Uber Eats a month, and people have subscriptions to a bunch of things that they forget they're even using. Sometimes you just got to start over. Change your bank card. Like every 3 to 6 months, say you lost your bank card, start over again. Mm-hmm. Because you're going to catch yourself with all these little subscriptions that are going to exit out of your life that have been just draining your bank account.
Right.
And so just starting as something as small as having a budget. Just every night, look at your account. Don't be afraid of it. Don't blind eye it. Really face it. Because when you start taking control of your money, you can start feeling more confident and empowered with it. When you keep it on the back burner, like that feeling like when you tap your card and you're like, I don't want to look, please be enough in there. That scarcity mentality is causing us so much grief, so much health issues, so much stress.
Yeah.
You got to empower yourself and you got to take control of your money.
I love that. And what are some really simple ways to budget? Because I think a lot of people hear the word budget and they think, it puts people might perceive that as being in a scarcity mindset.
Yeah.
Just because it's like, oh, I'm actually having to take away from what I would normally ever want to just throw money at or spend it on. Do you have a really simple way for the audience to help them break down a budget in a way that's simple, digestible, and allows them to feel like they're in control of what they have in their bank account?
Yeah, for sure. You can't solve a problem with the same mindset that you created it. So sometimes you not being the one that does all your budgeting is probably a good idea.
Yeah.
Because we can justify anything.
Right.
We can justify that expense. We can justify that new little, toy. We could justify the new car. We could justify anything.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need a third party to tell you no.
Okay.
And so that could be somebody that you trust. It could be a professional like myself. Having somebody at least start the process of budgeting with you is really going to bring in a level of self-awareness and reality that a lot of people are absent when it comes to their finances.
Right.
Because when you look at your finances and your budgeting, most people are going to say, okay, these are the things I want versus the things I need.
Yeah.
And the things you want, you generally do not need. So if you
Right.
really want to make a difference with your finances, it's going to require sometimes a little bit of sacrifice. It's going to require, a little bit of guidance and support. Don't try to do it all on your own.
Yeah.
Find somebody who's not going to charge you. This is why we don't charge broker fees.
Yeah.
I love free consultations because I want people to be good. I want people to do better with their money. So take the advice, have some support. Don't try to do everything on your own because you're going to find a way to justify your way out of it, but also holding somebody accountable is really important.
I love that.
Most of us are not going to hold ourselves accountable because as soon as we want something, we're just going to go and get it.
Yeah, absolutely. Kiefer and I actually had this conversation. Kiefer, if you're listening, the last time he was on the podcast and just mentioning having an accountability partner, whether it's with working out or whether it's eating right, or in this case, finances, and just having someone that keeps you in check and kind of brings you back down to earth when it's like, oh, my friends are going to Spain at the end of the month. Relatable example, because my friends were going to Spain and I'm like, sure. And my dad's telling me oh, you're 20, go. This is the last time you're going to do it. And I'm like, yeah, at the same time, I find too in the summer, spending money is like this. It just goes out the window like this, right? So having some sort of plan in place is always super helpful. And I think you're so right. It's so easy to have a friend or someone justify whatever you're spending your money on, whether it's a trip and I think what's important to mention too is that it's not that you can't have those things. I think it's just having a strategy in place first that allows you to still enjoy your life and spend on things that make you happy and bring you joy. But then there's probably so many other things too that we're spending on that we don't even realize is really draining us. And I know when I've taken a look at my finances in the past, it's been mostly around eating out and going to the bar.
Easy.
Because it's not just spending $30 on your meal that night, or, we're in Toronto, 60, and then spending another 20 on your drinks and then another $50 on your Uber home. And then at the end of the night, you're at $200, which on a good day, that could be your spending for the rest of the week, right? Or and I remember looking at my bill one night from a night out in Toronto, and I was $200, that could have got me a week's worth of, or 2 weeks worth of groceries, if not more. And if I just, not even stayed home, but didn't maybe go out to the bar after, or brought more drinks in advance, planned in advance so that I didn't have to spend that much on drinks at the bar. It's just those little tiny pieces that I find really add up.
Oh my God. That's the stuff. $20 for a drink. That's definitely never been my case. So I commend you for that.
Oh my God. Espresso martinis, Mario, are not cheap. Today's economy, it's ridiculous.
I'm old now. So when I went to the bar, it was affordable. But I'm going to tell you something. This is where the, life speeding you up kind of takes you out. There's nothing worse than trying to get your life on track. You're budgeting finally, you're doing everything. And then you're added to a group chat that says Spain 2025.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, there goes all that savings. And that peer pressure is real, right? And I think what people have to understand is, what are your goals? What do you really want?
Right.
If what you want is more important than this maybe Saturday night, you'll adjust a little bit differently.
Right.
You have to be able to make that choice. Wealth is built long term. There is no quick fix. There is no, get rich quick. That doesn't exist in the finance world when you're building a strong foundation. So sometimes it is making those choices. Having a pre-drink, which is less than going out. Maybe flip a coin. Somebody's a designated driver. Save money on Ubers. Something along those lines. But you have to sometimes make a decision what you want out of life. If you want to enjoy your early 20s, then go enjoy it. But you can't get both.
Right.
You know what I mean? I have a young lady that works in my firm. She's super talented. One of our top agents, she's 22 years old. And I tell her all the time, I go, you can be 22 or you can be successful. You can't be both.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Say that again.
Yeah, you can be 22 or you can be successful, but you cannot be both.
That's a really powerful line. Because I think a lot of people too use that and not even use it, right? I think it's a very valid way of thinking. I think a lot of the time too. And I feel like I teeter on this line of I'm so young and this is the time to make memories and have fun. But I'm I'm so young. This is also when I don't have a family yet. I don't have kids. I don't have a mortgage. I don't have anyone else that is relying on me to kind of raise them and feed them.
Sure.
And you know what I mean? So it's that balance of, is that what is future me going to want current me to enjoy and have fun, sure. But I think there's a balance of making it happen. And I would love to hear your thoughts. Is there a certain breakdown that you advise clients to use, whether that's, okay, for every single paycheck that comes in, maybe putting 30% towards a TFSA, for example,
Yep.
and then 20% towards savings, and then checking, like, do you have a singular breakdown that you find is helpful, or do you find this differs across the board?
It definitely differs. Everyone's finance is different, but something that is really smart that a lot of my agents actually implement for themselves. I have a very young team, that spans across Canada and the US, and they're really smart. They're smarter than I am.
Yeah.
And one thing that they always do that, let's say they want to go out for a Saturday night, and let's say that Saturday night costs $300. They first have to invest $300 to their investment to justify spending $300 on that Saturday night.
Okay.
If they're not willing to put the $300 in the investment, they're not going to be willing to spend the $300 on the night. So they always
Right.
invest in themselves first, and then the spillover, they get to spend and do however they want.
Okay.
That has worked for a lot of young people because it's forcing them to pay themselves first before they give in to any temptation. Not always easy, and it's not always going to work, but it is a great way to look at it. Jay-Z even says, if you can't buy it twice, you can't afford it. And so
My dad says that.
smart
And
man.
I'm like, ooh.
Is your dad, smart man.
Yeah,
It's
he
very
retired
true.
early and everything. But he's a huge, huge saver.
Yeah.
And when I was younger, he would always encourage me to save your money. He didn't want me going away to school because he didn't want me having to pay unnecessarily for rent.
Yeah.
And not that I regret my decision, but now that I am out of university and I'm kind of in the real world, I have a full-time job now, I totally understand where he was coming from. Whereas when I was younger, I didn't understand it as
course
much.
not.
Yeah.
Yeah, and saving, back then, saving was the right move. Now, with inflation so high, if you're not beating inflation, you're losing money. So
Right.
saving sometimes even now is not enough. It just feels like, what am I saving for? You have to make sure your money is keeping up with what's happening in the world. And so you have to go invest it. The amount of times that I've said to myself, I'm never drinking again versus I'm never investing again should let you know how to spend your money.
Ooh, that's a really good line as
Yeah,
well. You have
yeah.
a lot of good one-liners.
Thank you.
Here
Thank
that
you. I
I'm
appreciate
taking home with me. That being said, if someone's super unfamiliar with the investing world, and I myself I'm very new to all of this, and I'm
Sure.
still learning, and I've booked a few appointments with my financial advisor at the bank, and I have a few friends who kind of know what they're doing, but love hearing different perspectives on this.
Yeah.
If someone is super new to the world of finance and they don't know where to invest or where to start, where would you recommend to start as a beginner?
Yeah, start with education. Start getting familiar with some of the terminology, some of the different accounts that are out there. Do a little bit of research. There's a really simple book called Personal Finance for Canadians for Dummies. I always recommend that because it breaks down every single thing and no fluff. It's just everything you need to know about finance. There's nothing, sexy about it, but it's
Right.
really, really, really accurate. That alone will stop you from getting taken advantage of because there's a lot of that going out there. So the more you empower yourself with knowledge, the less likely somebody can take advantage of your ignorance.
Right.
Right? So that's number one. Start with that, just education. Next, work with somebody who has a track record, who has experience, who understands the world of finance, because they can bring light to a lot of the shadow parts, the parts that, that is more customized to you. No book is going to be customized to you.
Yeah.
And so you want to make sure you're talking to somebody that can help you understand at a different level what you're personally going through.
Right.
Even the emotion that you have towards finance, the amount of couples that I sit with, I feel like a counselor sometimes because money's such a trigger for so many people, right?
Yeah.
So having somebody support you and guide you, I think is really important. And take baby steps. Small steps are still steps. Don't try to, tackle the world of finance in one bite.
Yeah.
Just small little pieces at a time. And understand and get better and better as you grow. And I honestly, it's not that difficult. It's not that scary. People just need to not overthink it.
I love that. Starting with your very first tip of education, I think this is a really great tangible takeaway. You mentioned that there's a lot of terminology out there that a lot of people are unfamiliar with, and I would agree 100% on that. Do you have the top maybe 3 to 5 terms when it comes to the finance world that you think are really crucial for a beginner to be aware of?
That's a great
You
question.
want to let the audience know about?
Yeah, I think, I don't know if there's just a specific term, but I think understanding the different types of investment vehicles is
Okay.
really important. So what a tax-free savings account is, what an RRSP is, when to use both.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. The difference between investing in the stock market or index funds. There's so many different ways to say the same thing. For instance, a lot of people that invest with, let's say one of the top 5 banking institutions. A lot of times they think they're in an investment when they're not. A lot of times their money's locked in when they don't realize that it is. A lot of times people are losing money.
Right.
One of the best rules you can ever learn in the finance world is something called the rule of 72. And this is a crucial rule that most people are never taught, because if you're investing your money and you don't understand the rule of 72, it's the difference between the rule of 72 working for you or against you. And what the rule is just, it's a really simple rule that just dictates how fast your money is going to grow. So any interest rate you're earning on your money, if you divide just that number into 72, it's going to give you an approximate idea of how long it's going to take for your money to double in years. So if let's say you're earning 2% at the bank, 2 divided into 72 is 36. So if you had $5,000 invested today, it would take 36 years to turn into $10,000.
Right.
And that's how 80% of Canadians invest. They have no idea. They just hope and pray that their money's going to be big when they get, retirement time. And that right there is just knowing that is the key difference between putting your money into an investment that's right and one that's wrong, because you can't get time or money back.
Right. I would love to touch on a few of the key savings account that we do have in Canada, and you mentioned a few of them there. So the TFSA, the RRSP, and then the first-time home buyers account is also one that's recent that I know a lot of friends and people of my age have invested into. Can you maybe break down the difference between the three of them and when it might be most appropriate to invest in each?
Yeah, I mean, every situation is different. I think most people should start with a tax-free savings account. It's self-explanatory. It's just your money's going to have an opportunity to grow tax-free. Now, what people have to understand is when it comes to a tax-free savings account, the tax-free savings account itself is not an investment. It's just a vehicle. The funds that go into that account is what's going to determine your money to grow. So when people say, what's the growth like in a tax-free savings account? It varies, on the broker that you use, the company that TFSA is with. But a tax-free savings account is crucial because you want to have as much tax-free money in retirement as possible. I really, truly believe that. And the thing is, if you start young, it obviously does have a cap. So usually if you're born in 2009 is when the TFSA came out, you get $6,000, anywhere between $5,000 to $6,500 per year to add to that. Somebody who's my age, which is 42, I can't believe I said that. We're going to cut that out, drop that down a couple years. I'd have, if I never invested in a TFSA and you added up all those years from 2009, I would have like $90,000 to be able to invest into my TFSA. So that's really crucial. It's a great investment. An RRSP is kind of like a tax deferred account. So what that means is if you have a high tax bracket, you're getting destroyed on taxes. Dumping your money to an RRSP can be really, really beneficial. You can get up to 18% of your income per year put into there. Why it's important is for every dollar that you put into the RRSP, it takes $1 off of your income. So let's say you make $100,000 and you put 20,000 of that 100,000 into an RRSP. The government's going to look at you like, okay, you made $100,000, you paid taxes on $100,000, but you only actually made 80 because you put 20,000 into the RRSP. So now they're going to give you money back because you over contributed to your taxes.
Got it. Okay.
Great use of it. Now, I wouldn't overindulge in your RRSP because later on it can bite you a little bit because you're going to be taxed on a larger lump sum. It's kind of the government's way of taxing you when you're retired. So I wouldn't put all my money into that. And then for the first time home savings account, I mean, it has its purpose. I think there's better vehicles, to be completely honest. I mean, you only can get up to $40,000 in it. And then you kind of let that grow. But nowadays, if you look at the typical down payment on a house for somebody who has an okay credit score, it's 22 to 30%. 20%, 22%, 33% of an $800,000 house is way more than $40,000. So you're not getting too much of an advantage. So definitely in order of importance, I would max out a TFSA. I would start working on an RRSP. I would look into stuff like stocks or discretionary accounts, things like that, and then maybe a first-time home savings account.
I love that. That breaks it down really tangibly for the
I hope
audience.
so, because it's complicated and technical, and I don't want to bore anybody.
I think something that I've heard a few people ask, and honestly for myself too, I'm not too sure what the main difference is between a TFSA and the first-time home buyers account. Because is it a similar vehicle in the sense where when you're investing in your first-time home buyers account, it's then going into stocks similar to how a TFSA would, or is it a different vehicle? I love to touch
No, it's the same. It can be invested into the same funds. The benefit of a first-time home savings account is that it's an RRSP and a TFSA kind of combined into one. So you can take the money out tax-free, and the money you contribute, it actually counts towards your your RSP or your contribution or your taxes. So
Right.
it does have that advantage. It's not a bad vehicle to invest in. And you do have 14 years to basically utilize that account to
Okay.
purchase a home or anything like that. So
Yeah.
it does give you the opportunity to allow that money to grow. If you're looking for like to buy a home in the next couple of years, it may not be the best vehicle, but it's really just a TFSA and an RSP kind of combined with just a little bit more of a shorter threshold. You're just not able to invest as much into it as you'd like.
Gotcha. That's really helpful. For the TFSA, if you're to invest within that, because once you're in that TFSA, as you mentioned, we have to invest in stocks. So I know there's, the S&P 500, and then there's also kind of the top, accounts that you'll see that are really growing at an exponential rate. What would you recommend a beginner investing their money in if they're to be a first-time investor in a TFSA account?
Yeah, so there's a couple different options. Number one, if you're kind of the type that gets overwhelmed with this kind of stuff easily, or you don't have a lot of time to just stare at a computer screen and monitor which funds are best, sometimes working with a professional and having that money put into a pre-designed portfolio can actually really increase your growth. Like we have an incredible investment portfolios at our firm, and almost any firm you can go to, honestly, they're all really good. There's differences between a mutual fund. There's segregated funds that offer like extra protection and security for some people that's really important, as opposed to putting your money into a stock. And if that stock crashes, your money's not coming back.
Exactly, yeah.
So it really comes down to doing a proper profile on the client to determine the risk factor, what their long-term goals are, how long they plan on keeping the money in there, if they have the time to self-direct and self-manage their own funds, or sometimes taking on a broker to help you with that process can, expedite your growth and keep things, steady and stop the bleeding when things get kind of crazy in our world, which it tends to do.
Yeah.
A lot of us get information before it gets to the public.
Yeah.
So to be able to manage your money at a higher level like that can be very crucial as well.
So helpful. Thank you for breaking this down. I think it's going to really help a lot of people.
Yeah.
Can you explain the difference for someone who may be unfamiliar between a mutual fund investment versus an individual stock investment?
Yeah, for sure. So the thing is with a mutual fund, think of a mutual fund like a lot of different investments all bundled to one. Like, so it's like you'll have things like Facebook and Tesla and all these things all bundled together. So it provides that extra layer of security. Your money's not going into one single stock. The other advantage of having a mutual fund is that it's managed by fund managers. So if the world starts going a little bit crazy, or let's say Tesla starts going a little bit down and things are scary with it, they have the ability to adjust that fund, take Tesla out, put another company in, so they can stop the bleeding a little bit on it. Which provides that little extra bit of security as well, having a mutual fund. Now, a mutual fund also has its disadvantages. For instance, if you pass away with your money in a mutual fund, there's a lot of hidden fees that people aren't aware of. So you have to really, this is where the education side comes in. You're not going to be able to Google what you don't know. So talking to a professional is going to be obviously highly, highly advisable, but individual stocks are great. If you have a good understanding of what's out there, you have a little bit more money, because buying a stock can be very expensive. So that's definitely, a factor that gets brought into it. But really it comes down to, your comfort level, what you want to get out of it, and your lack of knowledge, or, the knowledge that you do have when it comes to your finances. There's really no right or wrong account. It comes down to, your comfortability.
I love that. And when it comes to a certain age of when you should start investing, is it ever too late to start investing?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, it
Tell
is
us.
too late. Okay, so that sounds bad, but it's not that it's too late. It just gets harder.
Right. So
the longer you wait to invest, the more you have to invest. See, for us to retire comfortably, in Canada, there's some crazy stats. So 74% of Canadians who retire are generally back to work or looking for an income within 3 to 5 years.
Wow.
So imagine working 40 years, your whole life, to provide for your family, to do whatever you have to do to retire for 3. This is why you see the sweet little, old lady at Walmart that greets you, or the gentleman that's pouring your coffee at Tim Hortons, or lifting lumber at Home Depot.
You're like, they're not doing that for fun.
I would not do that for fun. Okay, I've dealt with people my whole life. I'm not dealing with people in my retirement pouring coffee. I'm traveling, playing with my grandkids.
Yeah.
And so they're there, sure, if they're there because they're bored and they want to do it, all the power to them. But for most of them, they're there because they're surviving. They don't have enough to be able to stop working. 26% of Canadians will have less than $1,000 in their bank account after working 40 years.
Wow.
These are real stats that are plaguing Canadians. And so what people don't understand is if you want to retire comfortably, Canada, US, or anywhere in the world, you have to establish something called a FIN number. And your FIN number is your financial independence number. It's like a thumbprint. It's the amount of money you need at retirement in order to stay retired based on the quality of life that you want.
Okay.
So if you don't know what that number is, you're going into your retirement blind. And for most people, it's a lot bigger than they think it's going to be.
Yeah.
An average pension is $200,000 to $300,000. You're going to watch that money just deteriorate year after year, month after month, and it's just going to go away. And then what? There's nothing else that's bringing that back. So having an understanding of what your FIN number is, you have that money in there, you can live off the interest for the rest of your life and never even touch the principal amount. And so for most people, it's millions of dollars and they have no idea. So if you're 45 and you're starting to try to get your life together,
right,
you're going to probably have to put thousands of dollars a month to hit your FIN number. Whereas somebody who's 18, 19, 20 might only have to put a couple $100s to reach there.
Right.
And nowadays, we're trying to teach a lot of parents that for having young kids, there's actually children's wealth building strategies that you can start from when a child's 15 days old to start building wealth for the rest of their life, generational wealth, so they're not struggling for the whole life.
Yeah.
But that information is not out there. It's not public, that they don't know how to search for that. So there's a lot of ways, but yeah, starting younger is going to make your life easier. Starting later, it's possible. It's just going to take a lot more discipline and sacrifice.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's going to compound over the years that you're investing, right?
Yeah, you got to give yourself as much time as possible.
That's awesome. And when it comes, okay, so I heard a few really great takeaways from you thus far. So if someone is looking into the world of investments and they're kind of wanting getting started, first tip I heard from you was education. So what was the book that you mentioned? Sorry.
It's Personal Finance for Canadians for Dummies.
For Dummies. Okay.
I think there's like 6 volumes. Get the latest one because it's updated.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the second tip would be to look at your investment options and see which one might work best for you and which stocks might be most beneficial. And then the third would just be probably to continue and to pivot that along the way. Do you notice that as people are starting to build more wealth and as you kind of reach that age where you're making more money, or maybe now you're living with a partner and you guys have now split your finances or something like that, that the strategy as to how you invest changes? Or do you see more across the board the general rule of thumb of if you're investing, let's say, 30% of your general income into a TFSA, let's say an S&P 500, for like 10 years, does that normally stick, or do people tend to pivot? What would you say happens across the board?
I think it's always good to just hold as much as you can or as long as you can if you're investing, in that type of investment. But you also want to be able to add other revenue streams if you can.
Yeah.
So for some people that might be a property. Maybe you use the interest that your investment is earning to build wealth in another way. Or, one thing that doesn't get talked enough about when it comes to building wealth is your credit score. Your credit score gives you the ability to use other people's money to build wealth. If I can take a loan and use that money to build wealth and then use that wealth to slowly pay back that loan and then increase my revenue, that's how you do that. You can't do that with a poor credit score.
Right.
Cash is not king anymore. Credit score is. And so if you have a good understanding of how your credit score works and how to raise your credit score, which is not easy to do in Canada, that can give you access to so many doors that money and cash can't. It really opens up a lot for us. For instance, I know somebody who has a low credit score. They're paying more for their 2012 Honda Civic than people in my industry that own, Maseratis.
Right.
That should not ever happen. Because the person with the Maseratis has a high credit score, and so he's paying very low premium for his car.
Right.
Whereas the person with the 2012 Honda has a terrible credit score, so they're getting interest to death.
Right.
And so that right there makes a huge difference for sure. And if you're in a relationship, your finances also have to change because now you're bringing in a whole other emotion, a whole other human into managing your money. And you've had this beautiful little shell that you've created, and now you have another person that has to fit into that. Yeah. So, managing money as a couple is also a whole other, conversation and level. Another crazy stat when it comes to being, increasing your credit score in Canada, what people have to understand is that your credit score can, in 24 hours, 30 days, can crash your credit score if you do things wrong. But it could take up to 2 years to repair that in Canada.
Oh my God.
It's such a slow uphill battle. And for most people, they have no idea. So for most people, they put something on a credit card and they pay it right away and they think they're doing what's right, but they're not.
Yeah.
That's not affecting your credit score in any way. There's so many intricacies when it comes to establishing your credit. Like that's a whole other episode. We could do a whole episode on just credit score.
Yeah.
And the little tips and tricks with increasing it. But yeah, a lot of people have no idea what's happening with their credit score. They don't even pay attention to it.
Yeah. What would you say is like those little pieces that are bringing down our credit scores without people even knowing about? Like, how can we become more aware of what's happening on that side of things?
Yeah. So some of the worst advice that people are given is it's good to keep a balance on your credit card. It's not good to keep a balance on your credit card. Every month, your credit card should be paid off.
Right.
Every time money rolls over from month to month, it does affect your credit card negatively, or your credit score negatively.
Yeah.
The other thing that you want to remember is that when you put something on your credit card, I don't care if it's just lunch, set a reminder in your calendar to pay that off 14 days later. Don't pay it off right away, and don't pay it off at the end of the month. Pay it off 14 days later, because that's when it hits your credit score. And when you pay it, it shows that you've made a payment. So if you can learn to pay your credit card twice in a month versus once in a month in digestible pieces, it actually shows that you're making more of an effort to pay off your credit card. You're more inclined to now increase your credit score.
Right.
Don't also get sucked in to banks and everyone telling you to keep increasing your credit card. Buy more credit cards. Buying more credit cards or applying for more credit cards also affects your credit score negatively. So don't get all caught up in that. Just have one or two. Another thing that people do not understand, and this is the biggest killer, that if your credit card limit is $1,000, you do not have $1,000. You have 30% of that.
Right.
Every time you go over the 30% threshold on your credit card, it affects your credit score negatively. So you want to always keep whatever it is. So if you have $1,000 limit on your credit card, pretend you only have $300. Never go over that, because every time you max out your card,
3,000, you mean?
300. If you have $1,000 on your credit card, you only have $300. You have to stay within 30%. As soon as you're over the 30% threshold, you start having negative credit score.
My mind is blown.
Yeah, most people have no idea.
This is crazy. I feel like this is so hidden behind the scenes. I feel like
sure.
This is nothing that I was.
You know how
ever
much banks
aware
make
of.
on credit cards?
A lot, I would imagine.
Interest is they're making just for borrowing your money at a couple dollars here and there at an ATM. Banks make billions.
Yeah. That is crazy. Yeah. And when it comes to like little tips and tricks of how to ensure that we're keeping up with our credit score, aside from the 14-day rule that you just gave us, which is so helpful, by the way, I'm so curious as to why people don't know that though. Like, why is that not more of a common practice that we see? That's crazy.
It's only taught once you put yourself in massive debt, and then a debt specialist will tell you that.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's
it's not,
terrifying.
again, it's not common knowledge. It might even be in that book that I mentioned.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I read it, but that stuff should be common knowledge.
Yeah.
You know, when you get a credit card, like I see the amount of college campuses that have credit card booths.
I remember I went to
insane.
Laurier. Yeah. It
so
was always
it's insane. So you get a $500 credit limit, you know, 30% of that is nothing.
Yeah.
And so people are maxing out that $500 nonstop, and then they're just trying to pay it off when they can, have no idea that they're setting themselves up for complete failure.
That's wild. Okay, so if we were, let's say you have a $6,000 credit limit, you're not going to want to spend more than 30% of that a month.
No.
Wow. Okay,
Yeah.
so is
and
that...
if you do, you have to make sure that it's you've paid it off at least by the end of the month by 1 or 2 payments.
Right. Okay. So if someone wants to view their credit score, have insight into what their credit score is, because I see there's a lot of commercials that advertise this and like get you to check up on it. And I'm surprised it's not a more common practice like by the bank. Like, how would someone go about checking the credit score?
There's a couple different ways. You don't want to do a hard check on your credit score often, because that also lowers your credit score. Like everything lowers your credit.
Wow.
Everything does.
Okay. Wow.
So there's companies like Transamerica, Equifax. They're really good for looking into your credit score, but you don't want to do too many hard hits because it affects it.
Okay.
So then there's apps like Borrowwell. It'll give you an estimated close value to where your credit might be.
Yeah.
But nothing is 100% exact unless you do a proper check on your credit score.
Gotcha.
But it'll give you like within a 10 to 20 point ratio, which is good enough to get an idea.
I love this. Okay. What about when it comes to renting versus owning a home? I know most people my age, that's the goal right now, is if you are with a partner or even solo, it's like the one thing that people seem to be saving for is a home, because it's like the biggest purchase, obviously, that you're ever going to make in your life.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on that? Would you advise everyone owning their own home, or would you say on some end renting is more effective to some people? I'd love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. A lot of wealthy people I know don't own their home.
Really?
Yeah, they tend to rent and then rent out the home that they do own.
Okay. Yeah.
That's a really I think a really common practice. But for most people, it's not about owning a home, because most people are going to put themselves in such debt to own that home that it's not worth it.
Right.
You know, I have a client that their mortgage was, they purchased a home for $908,000 and it's only like 1,400 square feet. So we're not looking at this massive home.
Yeah.
And because their credit score was around the 600 range, you know, their income was great, over 200,000, everything was great. They still had to put 30% down.
Yeah.
How many people have $300,000 of liquid cash just hanging around to put a down payment on a home?
Right.
It's very, very uncommon. So getting in the home is one thing. You want to make sure that if you're going to get into a home that you can afford it.
Yeah.
It takes a long time for that home to be worth something, to have equity. Because right now we're in a down market. So people that bought during COVID, if they're trying to sell now, good luck.
Yeah, I've heard
You're
that.
going to be in a hard...
It's really hard right now.
Yeah, people are going to be losing hundreds of thousands of dollars from what they paid. And so it's almost not worth it. So if you're going to get into a home, make sure it's the right time. Make sure you've made the right decisions. You're financially sound. Don't look at it like, okay, I'm just going to work really hard and I know it's an extra $3,000 a month. Sometimes just renting right now, just to get used to the habit of it, is really important. Another really great tip, preparing for home ownership or even renting, is if you're living at home right now, go and kiss mom and dad, because it's a blessing. But the first thing you want to do is have automatic payments come out of your account into another account that you own for what an average rent or mortgage would be. Do that for 6 months or even a year and see if you can manage that money.
Yeah.
And if you can manage that money and the groceries and everything for 6 months to a year, two things are going to happen. Number one, you're going to have a huge cash reserve to get into a home that you're going to feel more comfortable with, or a rental. But number one, more importantly than anything, is you're going to understand if you can actually manage that finance.
I love that.
Because some people are such a rush for independence that they can't afford.
Oh, yeah. I love that tip. And with that extra money that you do put aside, and I think what's so important with that too is that so much of this is habit. It's knowing where to put your money, like knowing the education behind it, and then actually putting it into practice is admittedly obviously the hardest part, right?
Yeah,
like,
big time.
So if you're able to then take what you're able to build, and that like made me excited hearing you say that, because it would make you feel such a sense of accomplishment. And like, I am someone who currently is living at home with mom and dad. So mom and dad, God bless you both. I love you guys.
If you have an extra room, mom and dad,
I'm
I'm
done
with bills.
I'm like, I've taken over the spare room for like, I have a candle business on the side. My brother's like, why does she get to keep her stuff
That's
in
so
here?
funny.
I know, it's crazy. But anyway, that being said, it's like, it really is a blessing to be able to save. And I think what's so important with that too is like, it shows you what opportunity comes with working hard and really putting your future self first when it comes to your money.
Yep.
So I think that's a really good tip. Would you recommend someone just keeping that in a savings account, or would you invest that into a TFSA or put it elsewhere?
It depends. If you lack discipline, I would put it into something like a GIC where it locks it in.
Okay.
Doesn't allow you to take it out.
Smart.
But I really like the way you got to look at it is, think of it like this. Let's say you want to purchase a home, and let's say your monthly payments for that home is like $3,300. Okay. Yeah. It's not a small amount of money. Let's just say it's $3,300. If you were to take that same $3,300 and invest that every single month in a TFSA that's well put together with proper funds, and let's say you're earning 10%, do you know in 5 years, 6 years, you'll have over $700,000 in that account, which is pretty much the entire cost of that home. And meanwhile, in 5 years, you probably wouldn't have burnt off almost any of the equity in that home.
This is making me want to, as soon as we're done with this podcast episode, go to the bank and then get them to automatically put certain payments into a TFSA.
I'm telling you, if I didn't buy my home, I could, in 5 years, I could have had $800,000 cash as opposed to buying my home.
That is
and my
wild.
mortgage, I would not have $800,000 of equity in my home at that same time.
If you had to go back and do it again, would you have done that or rented?
No,
or?
I would not. I would have rented.
Yeah.
at a very low amount, modest living. I really don't care what anyone thinks.
Yeah.
And I would have put majority of the money that I would have put into that home and mortgage into an investment right now, and we'd be laughing.
So smart.
I would have taken my down payment. I would have put my monthly amount into an investment, and I would have $750,000 in 5 years versus
That is
having
crazy.
to, have a home that if I sell it right now, I'm losing money.
I know we were talking about earlier that you mentioned a lot of your clients that come in. When it comes to partnership and managing money, it can be a really sensitive conversation for good reason.
Yeah.
I think it can be really tough when like you and your partner may come from different backgrounds financially, or I think even just the mindset around the money too can be such like a tough topic to navigate. And there's this really terrifying stat that says 73% of married or cohabitating Americans say they experience relationship tension due to money decisions.
Oh.
How can we talk to our partners about money in a way that is productive and healthy rather than damaging to the relationship?
Super scary stat. Money is such a trigger for so many people.
Yeah.
And you mentioned it, our upbringing can be, shape one person and shape another person to come in and have completely different ideologies around money and emotions around money.
Yeah.
And it gets the best of both of us. Like I'm telling you, nobody is immune to this. I have such a wonderful wife and marriage, and we never argue, we never fight. It is honestly beautiful. And right now we're in the process of selling our home, and I swear to God, we threatened divorce 4 times in the last week.
Really?
It is a nightmare. It is never fun. Now,
Yeah.
obviously we're not, but it's that feeling of just everyone's always on, high edge. Like they're just strung up and just what to do. I think number one, it starts with communication.
Yeah.
But what people have to understand, don't communicate when emotions are high. Communicate when emotions are low, when you're both calm.
Yeah.
Keep it respectful. You know what I mean? And be honest. I think so many people, the amount of times, I can't tell you when a couple leaves my office and then one of them emails me and saying, don't share this information with my spouse. And for confidentiality, I can't.
Yeah.
Right? And it's really tough to know that because I know that that's just going to come out and it's going to explode.
What are they saying to hide? Like just money they may have set
This
aside,
account,
or
hey, can you
or this
actually change
debt?
the beneficiary to this person instead? I don't trust my spouse with this money. Like a lot of times it's really, really crazy. And so that
That's
lets
tough.
me know that it's a toxic, or a scarcity relationship. And you
Yeah.
can't have that. So when it comes to that, number one, always be respectful, always communicate.
Yeah.
But what you want to do is get ahead of the stress. And that means, have a weekly or even a bi-weekly, just quick little chat with your spouse over coffee in the morning or wine at night, whatever your preference is, and just go through your finances together. Make it real for both of you. Keep it calm, keep it patient, because the more you're both on the same page with what's coming in versus what's going out, it's going to help.
Yeah.
Number one. And number two, have some goals that are just yours. You know what I mean? God bless the kids, but have some goals that are just yours.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not, let the kids will be fine. They'll survive. Okay. Have some goals that are just yours that you two can get excited about, that you can focus on and start thinking about your future. Because if you're going one way and I'm going another way, it's like an elastic band. That tension is eventually going to snap and it becomes unrepairable.
Right.
So you want to make sure that you're having those proper conversations, those little budgeting talks, get ahead of it before it becomes unspoken resentment. If you notice that there's a spending thing that needs to stop, don't wait for it to pent up and then just attack when you're in the middle of a fight.
Right.
Because that's what's a killer. Instead, calmly just bring it up and say, how can we tackle this together? How can we fix this together? It's you and your partner versus the problem,
Right.
right? Don't
Yeah.
make the money the divider.
I love that.
Instead, tackle it like the buddy's coming after you guys and we're fighting back. You know what I mean?
I think what's so great about that too is that it's almost gamifying it.
Yeah.
Like it's making it, I think the reality is you're going to have to face it anyway. Why not do it from a sense that is just really helpful rather than harmful, right? So being able to sit down, like I know that would bring me so much comfort if I were to ever be married in the future, and to have that with someone, of just being able to sit down and, kind of open and transparently be able to have these conversations, because I think like we're hearing it from you firsthand, like it can get really ugly really quickly.
Fast.
And that's what's so terrifying, is that it can be fixed so like simply if we do get ahead of it enough. I'm scared to ask this, but I'm also just really curious. What are some of the most common things that people are hiding from their spouse about money?
Ooh, okay. This is not the views of Mario Francella and his clients, but one thing I see a lot is, I'll tell you a couple crazy stories. So number one is hidden bank accounts.
Yeah.
which I just don't understand. And it's just like money that they put aside in their own little world. There's nothing, I guess, wrong with it. They're not being vindictive about it.
Yeah.
Most of the time, it's because their partner has such bad spending habits and
Right.
such bad views on money, such a scarcity mindset. They're almost doing this as a safety net. God
Right.
forbid, if something happens, I got to be okay.
Yeah.
So I don't look at that as a negative, but it's still, a problematic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That if you can't trust your partner with any of that kind of stuff, there might be a reason why maybe that's not the right relationship, to
For
be
sure.
honest.
Yeah.
Then you have like some of the extreme stuff where, when we're putting a life insurance plan together for a client, they make the beneficiary their spouse, and then they'll call me after and say, can you change it to this person? I go, well, who's this person? Oh, they're just a friend. They're not just a friend. You know what I mean?
No.
It's
Oh my
it's
God.
craziness, that I've seen. And, sometimes it could just be, owning stocks or owning, I've had people have whole houses that they owned without their spouse knowing.
That the partner didn't know about?
No, because sometimes people just like to play the ignorant card.
Yeah.
If I don't bring it up, I don't want to fight. I don't want to argue. I know it's happening, but I don't want to ruffle any feathers.
I think at that point, it's so much deeper than the finances.
It's so much. It has nothing to do with money.
It's so multi-layered, right?
Yeah, it
Oh
has
my
nothing to do
God.
with money.
Yeah.
When you're afraid to communicate with your partner about anything, or you just want to be like, I don't want to shake up. I like living comfortably.
Yeah.
I don't want to shake that up because if I lose them, I have nothing.
Right. But you're only going to make it worse.
Way
'Cause
worse.
It's only like, it's not the money that's the issue. There's something deeper behind that that's like the core issue.
Yeah.
But the way I'm looking at this is it's not even if it's just your partner. What about a business partner? God forbid. Like
Even
where
worse.
you're both relying on it for your incomes, your families, your partners, and just knowing that the damage that could be caused there, it's something that people need to be really cautious of.
You have to have transparency. Like my wife's my business partner.
Yeah.
And, we have different roles and we don't ever cross lines for that. She does
Yeah.
her job and I'm grateful because I cannot do her job.
Yeah.
And I do mine and she doesn't want to do mine. So
Right.
it's beautiful. It's bliss.
Perfect partnership.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I want her to be more like jump on this podcast. She's a wealth of knowledge too, but
Yeah.
she's good with it. Like, you know what I mean? And so that really does help. But sometimes people force that partnership.
Right.
And when you force that partnership that you have a business and you want your spouse to be part of that business and it's not really their passion, now you're creating other problems too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think people just always want what isn't always available.
Yeah.
And instead of choosing the right partner and taking your time, we're like rushing into relationships, we're rushing into finances, we're rushing into everyone wants everything to happen right now.
We all know those people.
Oh my gosh.
It's crazy.
I like some people just they can't be single for an hour.
I know.
You know what I mean?
Oh, I know them.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
met a few in my life.
Trust me,
yeah.
it's insane.
It's crazy.
And they'll justify why it's a better.
I know.
fit,
I know.
but
It's because I feel like at the end of the day, it's really avoidance. Like,
It's avoidance.
and I think, you have to have empathy at the end of the day. I think
Sure.
it's hard, like, to not be able to face your own fears or like emotions about that kind of stuff. Like, I think everyone is really different in that regard, but I think it's just so important to put yourself first, right? And I think when you're constantly jumping from, and I don't even think this is just relationships. I think this could apply to jobs. I think this could apply to friendships. You see those people too that have new friends every like 6 months, right? Like
Yep.
it's a common pattern. And I think like a big thing is just getting to the root of like what makes, what brings you peace and joy. And, that's an entirely different conversation.
Yeah, but it's an important one.
It's an important one.
It
'cause
is.
I think it just shows how multi-layered when it comes to, especially money, how these things can get in the way and how they can be easily avoidable.
Yeah.
How early would you recommend people bringing this up in their partnership? Is this something that you do right away?
I'm so glad you asked that, actually.
Yeah.
That's a great question. How many times have we gotten into a relationship, especially as you get older and you start like not wanting to waste your time? And it's kind of like you put that person through an interview a little bit. It's like, okay, listen, do you want kids?
Right.
What's your future goals? How do you, how were you brought up? But no one ever asks, what's your emotions on money? How do you feel about money?
Yeah.
We've all heard of the 5 Love Languages, one of my favorite books.
I love learning about this.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
But people don't understand money has its own language and it's its own love language. And if some people have a scarcity mindset towards it, or some people have an abundance mindset towards it, knowing that before you get into the relationship is really, really healthy. What are
Right.
some of your future goals with money? You don't have to ask necessarily how much do you make. That comes with time.
Yeah, I think that's important to note too, is that that's not necessarily what we're suggesting.
No.
Numbers don't necessarily have to come into play right away unless it's like down the line or whatever, right? But sorry.
No,
continue.
you're right. No, please
I cut
keep
you
going.
off. No, yeah.
No, you didn't.
I think it's just, I think that's what a lot of people, when they hear the word money, they think I'm automatically going to have to share everything. And I don't think that is even it. I think it's just knowing the mindset behind it and what your thoughts are and what you would do. You know,
Yep.
I heard a really great way to intro this too, if you're meeting someone new as well, is just asking, even if it's like a first date, a second date, if you were to win the lottery, if you were to win $1 million, what would you do with that money? And if someone says, I would take it and I would retire right away, it's like, okay, that goes to show that person probably isn't too keen on, you know, like
spontaneity.
Yeah,
vacations,
exactly.
yeah.
On being entrepreneurial or driven or whatever. And that's totally fine. I think everyone has their different take when it comes to what they would want to do with that amount of money. I mean, the options are endless. So it can just be a really fun game to play. But then if someone were to say, I would take it and, like you said, buy a house in Australia or something really fun and crazy, then that also just gives you a taste of what their personality is like and what things could look like down the line for them. Yeah. So that's just something that I thought was really
I think that's a brilliant question.
Well. Yeah.
Like, we're okay to ask somebody, what's your favorite color? What's your zodiac sign? And none of those have any, like, whatever the answer is, it actually is irrelevant.
Yeah.
But we won't ask somebody something as important as that because you're going to talk about your finances more than you're going to talk about your star alignment for the rest of your life. I can promise you that. My wife hates me right now because that's a big thing for her.
It's so funny. Some people are like, well, if you know their zodiac, you know about their money. You know, some people would literally think
people
that.
will surprise you. Trust me. It's never going to be accurate. But
yeah.
I think that's such a brilliant question because that will tell you so much about what's going to happen in your life when money does come in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And don't accept it. Listen, I don't care how, you know, dreamy they look, how cute they are, how nice they are in that moment. If those morals don't align, when those looks fade, you're going to be stuck with the rest of that. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And so you have to prepare yourself for the long haul. If you're looking for a long-term relationship, you have to ask those questions. If you're not, don't ask those questions.
Yeah. I think that's super fair to say. But coming back to when you think would be most appropriate to bring all this up, what's your take on that?
You know, as that, you know, I don't know if do people even date anymore? Is it just kind of that?
I don't know. I think
everyone.
I know people. It's different. Like, you know, like some people it's like right from the jump. Yeah. Sometimes it's a few dates. You know, everyone's different, I guess, in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, during the dating phase or those early stages, like, having those fun little questions like over dinner or over, you know, having a glass of wine or just hanging outside, just whatever it is. Like, I think don't have a set time when it feels right. You know what I mean? Trust your gut a little bit and it's okay. First of all, it's not an invasive question. It's actually a pretty fun one. Yeah. You can ask that on a first date. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, if you won the lottery right now, what's your next steps? Yeah. I'm curious. Yeah. You know, it can come off as very like, you know, flirty and fun, but it's actually very telling. Yeah. And that's going to give you a wide open view of how this person's probably going to be when money comes in.
Yeah. I think it's compelling too. It's not just like, it's, you know, skipping kind of the boring, like standard questions and really getting into the deeper stuff, which is cool.
I think it's great. You got to get out of that surface level anyway. You know, get deeper. It's better. Absolutely.
I'd love to just end this off with you and asking if there's one piece of financial advice you could give to everyone listening today, what would it be?
Start today. The first step is going to be so scary anyway, so get it out of the way. Yeah. Jump in the water. Like, get a feel for it. Start small too. You know, get a feel with how investments work. You don't have to go, you know, because of some celebrity influence, go dump your entire life savings into the next, you know, shiny penny. Just start slow, start small. If you're scared, get help. Yep. You know what I mean? And I'm going to tell you guys something. Knowledge is going to eliminate a lot of that fear. Mm-hmm. The biggest challenge is people don't understand scared money doesn't grow well. And if you're investing scared and if you're always terrified and as soon as the markets crash, you want to pull your money out and as soon as things are good and you want to put your money in, people have to understand something. Success in investing is time in versus timing. Right. And if you're just trying to time everything, you're going to lose. But if you just put it in, trust the process, have some blind faith and let time take over, it's going to be fine. Yeah. You know what I mean? The markets have always recovered. They've always done well. Oh, yeah. So just start. Get help. Start small, one step at a time, and then slowly start adding on to that. You're going to start increasing. It's like anything else. You start a job for the first day. You don't know everything. Start small. What's the first thing you have to learn? Yeah, I love that. I actually read in The Psychology of Money as well. I know we were talking about this, and it was the topic on some of the
biggest investors in the world, and it was chatting about Warren Buffett. And the biggest thing that separated him from some of the other top investors of the world is that during the Great Depression and those major world events that a lot of people got scared and pulled out at, he just kept it in. And it's like, when you look at it across the board in the example of COVID, it's like history repeats itself. It's like there is in our lifetime going to be some other major world event or catastrophe that is going to affect the economy. And I think that's a really valuable tip, and something that I kind of learned from that book is that, you know, things are always going to fluctuate, but just knowing that this too shall pass and that nothing is forever, I think is a really valuable lesson there too.
Oh, it's huge. Like if you had $100 and you invested into like the 30s and the 40s and you just threw that $100 through all the wars, through all the challenges that our world has had, you'd have over $1 million today.
That's crazy
So
to think, just that little
trust
amount.
it.
Yeah.
You just don't, shut it off. If there's a phone that lets you track your investments, delete the app.
Yeah.
Because you're going to drive yourself nuts every day looking at that.
I think that's a really good tip as well.
Yeah.
Only look at it like,
Oh my God. Once a month. Just give yourself a little peek. But
yeah,
I know people that stare at it every day. Like, my money's down. Okay, it's probably going to go back up in an hour.
You
Just
know
relax.
what that's like? It's like looking at the stove waiting for it to boil. It's like if
doesn't.
you're looking at it, it's not going to boil.
It doesn't.
You have to step away to appreciate the growth of the boiling water.
As a
or
chef,
the
I'm
money.
convinced it does not do that. It just doesn't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And my few chef ventures as
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
I can also attest to that for sure.
I love it.
Mario, you are a wealth of knowledge. Thank you so
thank
much
you.
for coming on. You have given the audience so many great tangible tips when it comes to our money. So thank you for that.
Oh, my pleasure.
Where can everyone find you if they want to work with you? Share all of your socials. Share all your stuff.
Now I have to remember my socials. Jump on my my website. It'll give you a great background. MarioFrancella.com.
Yep.
Instagram, Mario J Francella. I'm pretty sure. And if not, please just reach out to you to come find me, because I have no idea how to even tell people to find me.
Sounds good. Well, what we'll do is we'll put your socials and all your info in the show notes as well, so that people have easy access to it.
Perfect.
But that sounds wonderful. Thank you, Mario.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. And guys, you know the drill. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. Share it with a friend. I think anyone could get really great use out of this episode. And we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining.